Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Tuesday Talks with Ruby Reese as a podcast format. I'm really excited to welcome you here today. My name is Killian and I will be your host. I am also co-founder at Ruby Reese, which is a small business all focused around dogs. And I suppose a little bit about our background. First of all, the background of the podcast. I mentioned this is the first time as a podcast, but we previously, for approximately a year, have been having these talks with the local dog community. Experts talking about absolutely amazing topics, and we've decided to move the format across to a podcast format in order to deliver the recordings in a much higher technical quality. So also a little bit more to Ruby Reese. We're a small business completely focused on dogs, particularly because our own French bulldog Ruby was born with food allergies, and we started down a rabbit hole looking at ingredients lists and what top quality ingredients go into dog products and what less quality ingredients sometimes make their ways in as well. And we've focused our business on providing absolutely top quality healthy products for our dogs. So I suppose where we're at the moment with our business is a really exciting time now. If any of you have experience of working with small companies, you might know that there's always plenty to be done. But I think right now for us at Ruby Reese, it's particularly exciting because we're not only launching this podcast and have plenty to do around that, particularly in a time of increasing the quality, particularly the recording quality. It's a very busy time. But on top of that, we're also on the cusp of a product launch. We've been launching a number of products over the last couple of months, and today, as I'm recording, we are just launching a new nutritional supplement. So you will actually be watching this in the future, and this will be within a few days. It'll be news from the past, but right now today we are launching our Green Lip Muscle nutritional supplement. And I suppose I wanted to talk about this particular period for us because it's a very exciting one, in that we love speaking with our customers and getting out and meeting you, and also speaking with you digitally on social media and email and everything. You know, one thing that makes us really happy is finding solutions to issues that your dog is having at the moment, or issues that you're having on trying to increase the nutritional value of maybe your dog's food, for example. And but another part is then taking that information that we have and trying to find a solution for it. So this can often lead us to developing our product range even further. We take that information and then try to create solutions, or to find appropriate solutions for our customers. So once we get into the research and development part of products, that's something that excites both Chris and myself. We are both co-founders at Ruby Reese, and we both really enjoy that process because it can be quite creative. It'll be no surprise to lots of you that have listened to me speaking before. I love nerding out on specific topics, and it's something that I really get enjoyment out of. Reading through scientific papers and seeing what studies say about specific ingredients. That's something that makes me quite happy, and I do understand that I'm kind of a loser in that sense, but nerding out on these topics is something that's really helpful then to our research and development process. But that's something that I wanted to share because that's not something that that whole process doesn't really get a light shone on it in the rest of our business and the rest of the social media and everything. I think most people only really see the tip of the iceberg in the fact that, there's a product launch and it's all to do with marketing and beautiful pictures. And, I do my best to make reels and videos explaining as much as I can about different products and different options. But I think the rest of the iceberg that goes on in bringing a product out to market is something that mightn't always be really evident. So the topic we have for today is something that's really, really interesting, and it's something that I've enjoyed recording with Niamh Lynch from Polite Paws. The story of cats and dogs and how they cohabitate is something that it goes way back in history. We see this from stories of them being arch nemesis to things like Tom and Jerry. Everywhere they're shown either as absolute enemies or indeed as friends. I mean, if you look into history across civilizations, we've heard and seen cats and dogs cohabitating, living together, in some level of harmony. So it's a really, really interesting topic that I've certainly enjoyed speaking with Niamh about, in particular because that very French bulldog that I mentioned earlier, Ruby, tends to take her job very, very seriously when it comes to hunting uninvited cats out of our garden, and we do try to keep those interactions to a minimum or completely avoid them. But it's definitely something, now that I'm thinking about it after speaking with Niamh, that comes up quite a lot in our day-to-day life. So without any further ado, I'm going to switch over to the recording that I had with Niamh, and a wonderful chat that it was. Niamh, thank you so much for coming on and joining us on Tuesday Talks. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me, Kitty. It's an honor to be asked. I was like, I'm so excited. You've got such like amazing people on before, and then to be asked, I was like, oh, I get to participate in the Tuesday talk. It's really
Well,
exciting.
well, I'm the one that's honored to have all of you guys on here and teaching me on my learning journey. So I suppose, would you mind doing us a little bit of an introduction into your background and how you got into training, and do you have any special areas of interest maybe?
Yeah, so I originally studied environmental science in DCU and graduated in 2013. And it was when I was working in the pharmaceutical industry, I realized that wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. And as a kid, I always wanted to be a vet. So I was like, oh, sure, I'll study something with animals on the side and see what happens. So I found Annie at Ireland, you've spoken to Anne before. I studied with them and part-time while I was still working full-time in pharma. And then in 2020, took the leap to start my own dog training business and never looked back. And I think my favorite part about this job is really helping people improve their relationship with their pets. And in particularly, I love working with like teenage dogs, the ones that are jumping up and like assaulting guests, and pulling on the lead and not coming back when called, and all of that crack. That's my favorite kind of age range of dog to work with. But I worked with dogs from tiny puppies all the way up to seniors. So a range of dogs that I work with on a weekly basis.
Amazing. That's brilliant. And like, I love hearing that, that you've come into it from a place of passion and a place where just a love of dogs and working with animals. It's a fantastic perspective to come into. There's plenty of other careers out there that people go for money or prestige or whatever. But in this particular industry we're talking about, it's amazing to see so many people that are doing it because of the love of animal and the love of doing it. It's definitely a career for passionate people, so it's fantastic. And you picked a wildly interesting topic that I'm really excited about. I'm sure it's going to be a little bit controversial as well, which is brilliant. the topic of cats and dogs. So how did you pick
Yeah.
this topic to chat about? And do you have experience with cats and dogs yourself?
Yeah, so I chose this topic because it's not really I don't see it being talked about on social media very much. But I've worked with plenty of families where they may have had cats in the house and then they've gotten themselves a puppy or a dog, and all of a sudden it's chaos. We don't know how to integrate this dog with our cats. The cats have run off, they're hiding under the shed for weeks, and it's disaster. So I think sometimes the plan of introducing them is never really thought out. And because it's not talked about in social media or really highlighted as an important thing to work through, and as well as that, culturally, cats and dogs are seen as enemies, aren't they? We have the saying, fight like cat and dog. So
Absolutely.
culturally, we see this kind of animosity between the two species. But actually, when we look at the plan and we break it down and we look at what dogs and what age groups and of animal that we should be introducing and how we introduce the species and how they are individually, like cats and dogs are so different. And yet we expect them to live and exist in the exact same environment in our homes. They behave differently, they have different social skills, and they're both capable of bonding with each other and bonding with people. But I think if we gave a little bit more thought to it, we'd have so much more harmony in people's homes. If we start right from the beginning. So I love this topic because it helped many people with their cats and dogs, and it's lovely to see it go from chaos to nice and calm and see that relationship develop over time as the two animals learn how to just cohabit.
Absolutely, and we'll get to the how soon, but like let's maybe just hone in on those differences, because we definitely know from Tom and Jerry to all the different characters we have, they're known as natural born enemies. So
Yeah.
what makes the two species so different from each other? Is it is it predatory drive? Is it misunderstood body language? What causes the issues between them?
So they're both incredibly different. The cats tend to be a lot more solitary, and they're solitary hunters. They don't express themselves with as wide a range of body language as we would typically see dogs do. Dogs are incredibly social creatures. They like to be around us all the time. Dogs have a much wider diet and they're a lot more of a scavenger. And cats be scavenged too. I think that's scavenged too. But dogs tend to be a bit more of a scavenger. Both can be predatory, but dogs can be there's going to be certain things that are going to cause certain dogs to express more predatory behavior. And then cats in the relationship, they tend to kind of be a bit grey. They're smaller, they're more likely to flee. But both animals are capable of learning, capable of being taught new skills, and capable of bonding, capable of bonding to us, bonding to each other. But there are stark differences in how they express themselves and the behaviours and the social aspects of each species can be quite different.
And I suppose, like, do they often, on a very first meeting, do they often misunderstand each other's body language as well? Is that something that can cause issues?
Yeah, it's definitely dependent on the age and the kind of relationship they're forming. So there have been some studies done on introducing puppies to cats, for example, or puppies to other animals. And this kind of conversation does kind of apply to like lots of different species when we're introducing them to dogs. So it's not just cats, it could apply to rabbits, horses, all that. But when we introduce small puppies to other animals, we find that as they grow up, they will display like a preference for hanging out with that animal. And so the social skills develop when they're smaller. So when we're thinking about introducing cats and dogs, ideally we would like the dog and the cat to be as young as possible, because that leaves that closer to the window in which they're going to learn about each other and learn to socially mix with each other in that kind of relationship way, like that social way. The older they get, we may be looking more of we just tolerate each other, we're just housemates. They do their thing, I do mine. But there's different kinds of relationships they can form together. But certainly the younger they are, the better.
Brilliant. And so age is one thing. And then do we see maybe that certain breeds of dog or cat, suit better to interspecies living, or does it really come down to more
Yes.
in an individual level then?
Um, so it'll always be individual. We'll always look
Yeah.
at case by case basis because even though there's certain breeds that we might expect to be harder to integrate with cats, we have to look at an individual level. But certainly there is some evidence that certain breeds may be more likely to score higher in predatory kind of chasing behavior. And there may be certain types and certain upbringings that may eliminate that dog from ever being able to live with cats. For example, there's quite a lot of retired racing greyhounds who aren't
Hmm.
going to be able to live with cats, and and that's going to be because what are they designed for? If they, they've been racing all their lives to chase down small fluffies, so they may not be. But of course, we know that there's certain individuals out there that buck that trend. Um, and I've got two sighthounds. I have a greyhound and a lurcher. And my little lurcher, I say if I had to, I could integrate her with a cat, no problem. With some management, but I think she would be quite a good candidate for doing that. Whereas my greyhound, absolutely not,
Okay.
absolutely not. She has eyes for the neighbours' cats. She'd absolutely love to play chase and to play with the squeaky toy that is the cat. But it really depends on the individual. Um, as well as taking into consideration their history and their
Yes.
breed, if that makes sense.
Sure, sure. It always has to be the full picture. But um
Yeah,
going back to one thing you touched on, you mentioned the neighbor's cat. So
yeah,
from later on in the conversation, we're going to presume that we want to introduce the two species to each other. However,
yeah,
there can be situations where, uninvited guests come over to your dog or your cat's territory, particularly neighbors' pets. Should we be allowing this to happen in the first place? Should we be allowing the neighbors' cats to jump over the wall into our dog's garden? Is this going to only cause bad interactions and build up bad relationships from the outset, or how do you feel about that? Just to get that one kind of out of the way.
yeah. So I have quite strong feelings about cats being free roaming. um, as a sight-hand owner, it does terrify me the idea of opening the back door someday to let my dog out
Mhm.
for a pee and there's a cat somewhere and God forbid anything happens. Cats once they leave your garden, once they leave your home, they're basically a loose pet. They're if they go into someone else's garden and get injured, you're not, like the neighbor isn't liable. Like I wouldn't be liable. It
Mhm.
would be um and cats free roaming as well. If you consider like it's like having an invasive species loose, but they do kill wildlife, do kill birds and things like that. So there's not to shame cat owners of it.
No,
Cats are
no.
wonderful pets. But I do think we need to think about um the legalities and the care of our pets, allowing them to wander into other yards. It's the same with our dogs. If we let our dogs really see wander, how do we know that they're not getting up to shenanigans, chasing cats or going in front of traffic or causing accidents? So I think it is our responsibility to make sure that our pets are secure on our
Yeah.
properties, and make sure our boundaries are secure so they're not getting, God forbid anything happened, a firework went off and they starper. So I think it for everyone's welfare, and we should really be keeping them on our properties. But as well as that, if you've got cats roaming around and your dog gets a chance to chase them, the
Hmm.
more your dog practices that chasing behavior, the less likely it's going to be in the future that your dog is going to develop an appropriate relationship with that individual animal. So
Hmm.
by when we rehearse things, we get better and better at it, right?
Sure.
So we don't want our pets, we do not want them practicing the stuff we don't want them to do. And so ideally, we'd be looking to make sure that our dogs don't develop this big history of chasing other animals, because if we ever needed them to have a big relationship with, like a social
Sure.
relationship with another animal, if they have a big history of chasing them or trying to catch them, the chances of that successful integration drops.
And
That makes
especially
sense.
because they're getting adrenaline every single time they're going through this chase as well. So it's
Yeah,
kind
it's
of, yeah.
absolute crack, like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose you were mentioning about free roaming animals in general. I always think about the disease control perspective. I can control what my dog is even picking up from the street and ingesting, and you can't really do that. If you think your dog eating fox poo in the forest is the worst thing, there's plenty of other things out there. So it just it always
You just
worries
don't
me.
know what they're getting.
Yeah,
Yeah, if you're not with them, you can't control what's happening. So
yeah.
absolutely, every keep the dogs on their boundaries and their cats on their boundaries, and this will be much a happier outcome for everybody.
Exactly. So let's move on to hoping that we want to introduce these species to each other.
Yeah.
Nobody's roaming where they shouldn't be. Starting off on the right foot, I suppose. How do we introduce
Yeah.
cats and dogs successfully?
So the first thing I want to do is understand the individual animals who are going to be introduced. So we want to know about that individual cat. Have they seen a dog before? Have they lived with one before? Have they experienced a relationship with a dog before? What did they do when they see dogs out and about? Do they flee straight away, or do they sit and watch? Like, what is the individual animal doing? The same with dogs. We want to know when they've seen dogs or seen cats, what do they do? Are they interested? Are they able to turn away from that cat? Or what do they do when they hear cat noises? So if you put on a YouTube video of cat meowing, what's their response? There may be some links to dogs that have maybe chased or caught a cat before, and their response to audio of cats, they may be very excited about it. So we want to make sure that the dog isn't super duper hyped up and excited when they see cats. What's their response? And we'll gauge and we'll garner what their responses are to them, particularly at a distance. What we really want to look for is a dog that can turn away from a cat if prompted. Can they eat food in front of that cat? What we want to see, can they do things? Can they respond to us when the cats, even though it's a little bit exciting? And then when we're thinking about introducing them, then we would set up with whoever we're getting the dog from or the cat from. Really, the best outcome would be if you're getting a puppy or a young dog and bringing it home to an already established cat. But we would swap blankets or scent swap. So you have a little blanket from the cat at home and bring it to where the dog is, and you bring a little blanket from the dog and bring it home to the cat. And you'd want to see what the responses are. Does the dog sniff it and get super excited, or does he sniff it and go, "Oh, that's interesting," but then move on? And what does the cat do? Is the cat worried, or kind of what does she do with it? Does she roll on it? Does she walk away? What happens? So we want to see what's their responses to each other when they're not visibly there, they're not in the same room, they're not around each other. What are they just like with just the scent? That's the starting point. That's where we start.
And I'm guessing here a desensitizing indicator is going to be good as well. So if the dog or cat in question is kind of maybe slightly more excited the first time they sniff at it, and then it's like, oh, okay, that's slightly more boring every time, right? That's kind of what we're hoping for, really.
Yeah, they're kind of, it's not getting more exciting. It's kind of, oh yeah, I sniffed this blanket before. I know what that cat smells like. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if and that's where we start. Okay. And then moving on from there.
Sorry. Then moving on from there, we want to think about our house setup, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we're living with cats and dogs, when we first bring whichever one home, we want to have the house divided into kind of 4. So you'll have the cat space, the dog space, and you'll have kind of an airlock, a neutral zone. That could be the hallway. And the airlock is going to be so that if a door opened, for example, the other animal still can't get to the other one, if you get me.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an airlock, so there's 2 doors between them at all times. And then it's kind of a neutral ground, like a neutral room where neither are going in. And that's the room where we would be doing the intros later on.
Okay.
So the house divided. So it's going to be completely split down the middle for a little while. Because you need to remember, we've just brought a new animal home who's trying to find their feet. They're trying to figure out, where am I? I've landed in this brand new topsy-turvy world and I don't know which way's up. So they all have to settle in. So not only are they trying to settle in, we're trying to establish all these new relationships. So give them a bit of breathing space. They're still sniffing each other on the blankets and all that. And then they
Yes.
start to sniff each other through doors. They know that there's another one in the house. They know the other's there. Even though they're rooms apart, they know, right? So then what you want to start doing then is teaching each animal skills, right? So we want to start teaching our dog some really helpful behavior that's going to help us when we do introduce them. So things like, can my dog touch my hand on cue? Can they do a hand target and turn their heads and touch my hands? Because that would be a nice way of turning them away from the cat. We
Yes.
might teach them to be crate trained so they can use a crate. We might teach them really nice loose lead skills. Can they be on lead? We might teach them to settle on cue on a mat. So we can put a mat down and they relax. Because sometimes when we're working on it, when we're introducing them, stillness is going to be better, having them still rather than lots of movement and chaos. We want them nice and still and
Sure.
calm. We might then think about muzzle training because we want it to be safe for everybody. And then
Sure.
confinement training. Can they be comfortable one side of a baby gate or a barrier? Because that's going to be really important. And then for our cat, we want to teach them a really reliable hand target as well, because we want to be able to teach them how to get up onto high shelving, high places, because cats want height, right? Cats love to be up high. And cats feel safer up high. So it's going to be really good and really useful to have a high space in your neutral room where you're going to be anchoring your cat. We want them to be settle trained as well. Can you teach them to sit on a mat or something or up on their shelf so that we can keep them still? Because remember, movement is exciting to dogs. So if our cat's running around the place, they're going to be like, oh, this is very exciting. So we want them nice and still and calm. Can we teach our cat an escape route? So can we teach them how to leave that room? So you might bring them into the neutral room and let them leave. Teach them how to leave, teach them where to go, teach them where the exit is, so that if they're scared at any point during the process, they can just go. They can just leave and get out of there. And we'll always let them escape if they need to.
Yeah.
So before we ever introduce them, there's tons of teaching, right? There's tons of skills that both individuals need to learn and need to rehearse and practice over and over. And then we'll move on to the big day where they're finally going to be in the same room as each other. I know. It's very exciting. So do you have any questions about that process, first of all, the preparation?
Terrified. I'm terrified about the next bit that's coming. Because I know our little French bulldog seems very, very innocent, but she absolutely goes crazy when she sees or hears cats. And it's not from I mean, she was as a very small puppy she was introduced to cats, so it wasn't then. It's more like the unwanted visitors in the garden, or the uninvited, let's say, visitors in the garden, and she's terrified that they're taking over her territory in her garden. So it really, really worries me about the next bit coming, but it's also I'm very excited to hear how that goes. So yeah, let's jump straight into this bit.
So the next bit then, you want to have your cat up high, as far away from where your dog is going to be as possible, right? So get your cat set up first. Bring them into the room first, because if they're already just there, when your dog walks in, you might not even notice, So your cat's up there with a little licky mat or all the best chicken in the world, sitting up in their shell, licking away, having the best time, enjoying their life. And then you're going to bring in your dog. And what you could do is you could have baby gates across the room for safety, so that your dog and the cat can't get each other. And we already know that our dog is pretty calm around the scent of your cat. We wouldn't be getting this far if your dog wasn't able to just be around the house with the scent of cat and hear them and be nice and calm when they hear them. They have to be able to hear them and be nice and calm. So we've already done a lot of that stuff. We've already started teaching them to settle. We've already chopping a lot of skills. So we've already got loads in our arsenal for working through this. So we want to be able to see, can our dog respond to known cues in the presence of the cat, even though the cat's all the way down the end of the other end of the room. We want to be able to reward them each time they kind of glance at your cat. We want to be able to cue them to do all the things we taught them to do. We essentially want to be seeing a dog who's pretty relaxed. we'd be worried if we started seeing like heavy panting or trembling. So my dog, my greyhound, sometimes if there's a cat crouched in the garden through the window, she'll start trembling with the adrenaline and the excitement. That's not what we want to see. We want to see, we don't want to hear a lot of barking or whining. And we don't want to see a dog who can't look away, who's so fixated on our cat that it's too difficult for them to listen and to do all the things. So if we see any of them, we push too far already, we need to go back. And all of this, I would be working with a professional. If there's pet owners watching who are thinking about getting a dog and they've got cats, or vice versa, working through this, I highly recommend you get a professional, because you're going to need one to guide you through each of the steps and to read your dog's body language and read your cat's body language to figure out what's really going on.
And I think this sounds like such a process that that, you know, if you get it right, you're going to have a happy lifetime ahead of you of cats and dogs. Whereas if you're not doing things right and you're doing things maybe half baked and you don't know the exact signs that both the cat and the dog make when they're excited, terrified, etc., then you could end up making situations an awful lot worse than they need to be, right?
Yeah, so you don't have to you don't have to just say, oh, they'll figure it out, or they'll figure out who's in charge or whatever, because that approach is probably going to cause a lot more stress than it's worth. And really, we are aiming for tolerance. We really want the two to tolerate each other. But ideally, like bonded, we'd love to see dogs and cats coupling together and living their best life. But if they just hang out, if they just like roommates, that's good enough. What we don't want to do is let that relationship break down from the beginning. We want to make sure we're working through it step by step. I know it sounds like a process. It's going to take a long time. It's going to take weeks and weeks and months, potentially months and months, you know. And there's probably going to be a little bit of management for life. There's probably going to be a little bit of but these are the things we kind of need to be thinking about when we're introducing our dogs to other species. Or indeed, if we're getting a second dog, we need to be thinking about how we're going to introduce these two so that they're not sticking each other after a week, you know. So the process needs to be a lot more thoughtful and, you know, drawn out in order to get the best possible chances of success. We can't just let them figure it out, because what will happen is 6-12 months down the line, someone's going to get injured, or you might never see your cat again. It might just go, I'm moving, I'm off, bye. It's happy and that thing.
And
so,
it really sounds like we're trying to make it, I suppose, you know, a boring interaction, really the first interaction, you know, as boring as it can be. I've heard the phrase before, boring socialization is good socialization. It's really
absolutely.
As low energy as we can make it, right?
Yeah, we want it to be so dull living with a cat. Like, oh yeah, the cat's here again. Oh yeah, the dog's here again. No bother,
Absolutely.
no fear. We don't want them afraid of each other, really. And we want their relationship to be very much like, oh yeah, that's the guy I live with. You know? You know, it's really that's the person I live with. He's
exactly.
fine, you know. So that's kind of what we want. We want it kind of dull. Because the more excitement you add, the more arousal rises, the more intensive it might get, and the more we're likely to see predatory behaviour or conflict. And we want to be able to, then we're
going down the wrong route.
Yeah, absolutely. So we want it, boring. We want it to be so boring. Of course, I could do all my tricks in front of the other, because they're not a threat. They're not following me. They're just part of the furniture.
Exactly. And I suppose maybe one of the questions people are going to be asking is, do you think it's easier to usually introduce a cat into a dog's home or a dog into a cat's home, if you understand that question?
Yeah. So for me personally, I think introducing a dog into a cat's home is going to work out a little bit better. Because first of all, the cat is the one that's the most vulnerable here in most situations. The cat's the one who's probably come out worse for wear. Dogs are generally bigger. Most of them are. So of course there's some cats that are huge for their dogs. But generally the dog is going to be stronger. It's going to be able to do more damage. And we really want to introduce young animals together if possible. But I would say in my experience, that other trainers will have other experiences, but in my experience, introducing a dog to a cat, an already established cat, is probably going to work out a little bit better, especially if that dog is quite young. You can
Hmm.
kind of just teach him lots of new skills, and he kind of doesn't know any difference. Joey's puppies are growing
Yes.
up in that hole. There's like, oh yeah, cats are here. It's fine.
Absolutely, yeah. And the cat will then have the benefit of knowing all of its escape routes and where the high places
Yeah, with the
are. And
talking skills. Yeah,
sure,
absolutely. Teaching you, never forget to teach the cat the skills too, because sometimes we think we focus a lot on the dog, but actually you can teach our cats some pretty cool things. We can create train cats. We can do lots of cool stuff with our cats. And by teaching them skills, we're benefiting them. We're teaching them to have agency over the situation and teaching them how to feel safe with that they know what to do when they're cute too. And yeah, I think let's not forget the cat in this as well, because that's a very important part of this whole interaction.
I'll have to get you back for another full session about training cats because that sounds intriguing. But we also mentioned when we first discussed this episode about rescue dogs and cat tests that might be
Yeah.
done. What are the cat tests, and and what are the problems and issues that are seen there?
So in my experience, when I've had a dog be cat tested before. I had a cat when I was so I've had a dog, then we got a cat, and then we got another dog when I was a teenager. So how that situation went was, did all the wrong things introducing our kitten to our already established dog, and they just tolerated each other. I think my dog was a little bit frightened of the cat, which worked out well because it just gave its face. Um, and then we adopted a dog who had to undergo a cat test. And the cat test consisted of bringing the dog on lead into our house, and if it didn't chase the cat, it was grand. And I remember even thinking at that time, going, I'm not sure this is a good idea. But the rest of the family were like, oh yeah, let's get the dog anyway. And it was grand. Like the rescue was happy with it. We were happy with it, but that relationship never blossomed. The dog and the cat
Mhm.
never got on. And I think, I don't know whether it's changed now. I haven't had experience with rescues currently, how they're approaching it. But, 10, 15 years ago, it was introduce the dog on lead to the cat and see what happens. And that's not going to be a good indicator of what's going to happen between the relationship between them, if that's how it's being done now. Because, as we said, there's a massive process, isn't there? So we don't get to the introductions until later. And then think about, if we're introducing them to the adopter's cat, that dog has just been on a car journey. They've just gotten out and gotten into a new space they don't know anything about. They're surrounded by strange people. They don't know what's going on. And then we just put this random other species in front of them, and they're going to be like, I have no idea what's happening here. And then we may get an interest in chasing and all of that. And then think about introducing rescue dogs to other species. If they're living in a kennel environment, their stress levels are already up to here because it's so noisy and it's so much. It's too much for them. I'm never trying to introduce them to a cat. By showing them the cat, I just don't think that's going to work out. And so, we want to be kind of looking at the dog's history, getting those answers from maybe the previous home. Ideally, if it's a puppy, then we can just bring them home and have the house divided and we'll work up to it. But with adult dogs, we want to get as much history as we can about what they're like with other species before we ever think about giving them to adopters with a cat. You know what I mean? So we need to take it way slower and pulling it right back. Cat testing by showing them the cat is not going to indicate whether it'll work out or not.
Sure, and I think it's a very interesting litmus test, really, because anyone that I speak to from the dog industry that seems to know what they're doing and had a lot of success, just like you're saying, tend to put steps in place to build a dog or build an animal up for success. You want them to succeed at what you're you're hoping for. It's not you're not setting them up for failure. And it sounds like if you completely avoid the whole process that you've just outlined, that sounds super, super logical, and you're putting all of the stepping stones in place for a successful interaction. If you completely throw that out the window and then just jump straight into it with an interaction right away, doesn't sound like the most logical step. So hopefully things have changed over time. But I suppose if that lead wasn't there, and you know, aggression does occur, if dogs and cats are having a serious fight, what should we be doing as humans? Should we be jumping in, or how should we be handling the situation to minimize injuries for everyone, all parties?
Oh gosh, that's a scary one, isn't it? Imagine
Yeah,
it'd be a lot because, you know, with a dog fight, you kind of have a little bit of time. Like most dog fights are generally kind of just noise and buster. It's usually a few starks and then they kind of get over it. If it's a serious dog fight now, you need to be breaking it up, but break it up anyway. But you know, with the cat and the dog though, if there's aggression and the dogs chase the cat, it's very predatory. It's I'm going to get this animal and I get it, you know. You gotta do what you gotta do. I guess make noise, try and, you know, scare them a little bit. You know, you could, if you can get a hold of the back end of the dog and kind of hold its waist just a little bit off the ground and move them backwards, can sometimes they can let go. But yeah, I probably wouldn't try and jump in by putting my hands around anyone's mouth.
sure.
And you know, it's likely that both animals will get injured in the process as well. You know, cats are going to bite dogs as much as they can and claw at them, and those injuries are going to need seeing to you afterwards. And cats are quite good at escaping and jumping up onto things as well. You know, we're going to hope that the cat can get out of the jaws when you do try and intervene. But in that situation, I'm not too sure. It depends on the size of the dog as well. The damage might be done.
It's going to be situational, and it sounds like from what you're saying and what you've said about the different breeds and how they interact, I suppose trying to give the cat the best chances of getting away or getting out of the situation is probably going to be your best bet. So that might be opening a gate, that might be opening a window, who knows what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be trying to get some escape for that cat so that when the dog releases, that cat has the best chance of getting away. But in the moment, I don't think there's going to be a whole heap. It's going to be, they're traumatic situations, you know, and both of them are going to need veterinary support and care afterwards. So the risk then would be if it's outside, your cat's going to go and hide somewhere. So you're going to have to get the cat trapped as quickly as possible to get them into a vet for that veterinary care. And if it's indoors, opening windows, opening doors, whatever you can, make noise, bang a popping pan, try and get some relief for that cat to get away. But it's going to be a scary situation for all of that happens. Hopefully that never happens at anybody's house or anyone's garden, and everyone here is good. But
I was going to say you know what, I suppose we took the conversation to a place that's quite dark, but this is also the reason why you want to then do these interactions properly and build up for success all the way along, because you don't want to get to a situation where you're saying, oh my God, we need to get to a vet. You know, it's we need to put all the steps in place so we're not going there. So I suppose that's also the way to look at it. And looking more positively, do you think that the species, once they do get past maybe tolerating each other, and maybe if they move to an area of you know, where they're really bonding, have we seen that dogs and cats can also influence each other's behaviours?
Yeah, I think so all behaviour is cued by the environment, right? And so both of them are going to learn the different routines of the family life. They're going to learn when mealtime is. They're going to learn what it sounds like when they're going to get fed, when there's treats going. And so, of course, they're going to be watching each other. They're going to be watching each other's cues, figuring out what are you getting, what are you doing. You know, I know that between my own dogs, they've learned that one of them, if she barks and the other one's on the sofa, the other one will get off the sofa. Ivy will get off the sofa to go see what she barked at, and then she gets her spot on the sofa. You know, she runs and steals the sofa on her. So they learn really quickly about other individuals and learning how to control the world around them. So that, of course, there are going to be different things that one might do, and then the other goes, I know what you're about to do. That means that if you do that, the human comes down, so I'm going to get in here now, because if you're going to get a treat from the human, I want to get a treat from the human. So absolutely, they can influence each other's behavior, because they'll be watching each other all the time. They'll be watching us all the time. So absolutely, and I'd say the shenanigans that some of the most like lovely bonded cats and dogs get up to. I've seen some videos online of them playing and doing all sorts of silly things, or massaging each other with their little paws. Like, yeah, absolutely, it can be gorgeous relationships formed.
Definitely. And we also have some friends that have lots of cats and dogs, and they're living very, very happily together.
Yes, FFs.
So it's been really, really interesting speaking with you, but do you have any like personal success stories that stand out more to you, or is every story, I suppose, as valuable as each other, or does anything stick out?
Um, yeah, I've had a few before where, someone may have gotten a 9 or 10 month old dog, and they already have cats in the house, and the dog was going bonkers, like bonkers at the cat in the garden, and couldn't leave it alone. So when I arrived, then we talked about paring it right back, splitting the household, and worked through the plan systematically. And within, I want to say, a couple of months, they were able to just chill in the same room. The cat could be atop the fridge, the dog down by the table, and able to just be. Um, but yeah, it was shortly after adoption of the dog that they had intervened. So it wasn't practicing or rehearsing the chasing of the cats for very
Sure.
long. So we were able to pair everything right back and get in there. And then in a few months, the two have been living successfully ever since, I believe, since I last spoke to them. But yeah, it's all going well, and they're all hanging out in the same room. Everyone's happy to just exist, which is really, really nice to hear.
Brilliant. Thank you so, so much, Niamh, for coming on and sharing with us. I mean, it's definitely given me confidence that that cats and dogs can live together, with the
Absolutely.
right professional setup, and
Yes.
with taking a bit of care to set them all up for success. It sounds very, very possible. Thank you so, so much for coming on and sharing. Appreciate it so much.
No problem at all. It was great to chat to you.
Thank you. So a huge thank you again to Niamh for that chat. I really, really enjoyed it, and I hope you did as well. If you want to see more of Niamh's work, you can check out her website, politepaws.ie. If you want to check out our website and support us, we are ruby-reese.com, and you can find all of our socials in the podcast notes as well. Additionally, it would be absolutely amazing if you could follow us or subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening to it. And all I've left to say is thank you very much for joining our Tuesday talk, and look forward to seeing you next Tuesday.